Avenger with the Public Affairs Forum at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. For more information on our Public Affairs Forum and to watch former forums on our church website, please go to www.austinuu.org. At this time, Del Beulah is going to introduce Stephen Adler, our mayor, and Brandi Clark Burton.
Welcome. I wanted to thank you for coming. The mayor and his former environmental assistant, Brandi Clark, are going to be talking about their recent trip to Mexico, the international group of cities talking about what the cities can do about climate change since the states and the other governments are not doing what they need to do. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I wanted to welcome both of them. Mayor Steve Adler, Brandi Clark Burton, come up and share your experiences with us.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you got a nice round of applause there. First, I want to thank everybody for being here. Second, and as we start, I want you to know how excited and pleased I am to be able to do this with Brandi. She's one of my heroes in the community. And when I was brand new mayor, stopped what she was doing in life and gave me 2 years to help set up our office and point it in the right direction on lots of different areas, but most importantly, these, and I want to say thank you to you too.
My total honor and pleasure. Thank you.
That was not in our script.
No. Let me turn up.
But I do want to thank everybody for being here. I mean, I see faces that I recognize as having been involved in this for many, many years, and new faces also at the same time. But by self-selecting to be here today on this subject, you've demonstrated that you are among the brave and the rare and the forward-looking that are ready to get engaged on and curious about and ready to really take action on a subject that even folks that are involved in it find mind-numbingly complex and sometimes absolutely overwhelming. So today we're going to talk about climate change.
This Thursday, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of climate leadership in Austin, Texas, which started with the 2007 climate resolution passed under Mayor Will Wynn. Looking around this room, I see some of the stakeholders who were involved back then, and you guys are the stakeholders, meaning you have a personal stake in the outcome, and I really appreciate you being here. In this case, the outcome that we're talking about is limiting global average temperature to 2 degrees Celsius. That means 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit over pre-industrial temperatures.
So in December, Brandi and I went to Mexico City for the C40 Cities Mayors Summit. I had representatives from the C40 network that has started out with a smaller number and now has grown to 90 of the world's mega cities and innovator cities that are taking actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As an aside, it was fascinating to be in Mexico just a couple weeks after the national election. I think we were among the first elected officials to make it to Mexico, but that's an entirely different story than what we're talking about today.
Another day.
So at the C40 meeting in Mexico City, the C40 rolled out a new report. It was called Deadline 2020, and it's really about how the cities will get the job done, and that was the name of the report. It talked about things to do, but it started out with a pretty startling set of conclusions, which helped set the tone and the framework for the time that we had together, and set out recommendations. But but most importantly, I think it laid out in context the urgency for the work that we had to do. That quite frankly, it's going to fall on cities to really take the lead.
In Deadline 2020, it states that in reality, we have only 4 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, before the world will have locked in sufficient atmospheric emissions to exceed 2 degrees Celsius warming. I'm not sure what the expression was on my face when the C40 speaker explained the difference between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius is the difference between manageable and disaster. Well, why would they say that? Well, carbon dioxide, when it is emitted, it stays in our atmosphere for centuries, and it builds up cumulatively. And we're on a trajectory such that by 2020, we will have emitted enough CO2 that we cannot hope to keep temperatures from exceeding that 2 degrees Celsius increase. And it's interesting to note when you hear people talk about 2 degrees, it may not sound like a very big number, but when you remember that figure translates to 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and that it's a global average over land and sea, with lower overall temperatures over the sea and higher over land. So with 72% of our Earth being covered by water, and those higher than averages changing toward the poles, some parts of our Earth can be seeing a 9-degree increase, especially over our northern latitudes. And that's what that 2 degrees average actually equates to. And as you can feel in this room, and you know in Austin especially, the difference between 100 degrees and 109 degrees is significant. So what's also important about the 2 degrees Celsius limit is that scientists tell us that beyond this point, impacts become extreme and unpredictable, and dramatically increase our risk of triggering bigger global changes. Tipping point, if you will. And in the Paris Agreement, which was just ratified last fall, 197 nations committed to ending the crisis at 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. But the agreement does not go into effect until 2020. You see the problem here? How can an agreement intended to shift the trajectory of warming accomplish that if by the time it's enforced, it's already too late?
That's one of the complicated questions. There is, and you need to pause and remember and resolve that there is great potential in working through cities. Cities are responsible themselves for 1/3 of the emissions, and cities have local control, and they have great capacity to do and work change. The effect of climate change has an enormous and direct impact on cities, as we've seen here with flooding and droughts and fires. And unlike national politics, city government owes their allegiance to the people that are right next door. That's why C40 cities researched and published that article or that compendium called Deadline 2020. Deadline 2020 makes it very clear that it's going to require a radical acceleration of action in the next 4 years, as Brandi described, in order to make a meaningful difference.
So here's some numbers to put it in proportion, the scale of action needed. In the preceding 12 years, between 2005 and 2016, C40 cities collectively delivered nearly 11,000 climate actions, as reported in the Carbon Disclosure Project. In the 4 years from now to 2020, an additional 14,000 actions are required. This translates to a call for action that has C40 cities needing to complete 125% more actions in less than half the time. And presumably a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. The timelines are important. So let's take a moment to look back at the history of global climate action.
You know, some people, hopefully fewer and fewer over time, are beginning to first learn that there is a link between human-caused action and the climate change challenges we have. In reality, this link was first established in the late 1800s by scientists that recognized and published that connection. It took 100 years after identifying that link. It took until 1992 at a gathering in Rio de Janeiro that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that's
UNFCCC.
UNFCCC, first established an international environmental treaty to stabilize atmospheric greenhouse gas concentration. Since 1995, the first Conference of Parties, or COP, met in Berlin, and delegates from virtually every nation in the world have met annually since that conference in Berlin to come to an international agreement on carbon reductions.
In 1997, the Kyoto Protocol aimed to establish legally binding obligations for developed countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but it was never ratified. A year later, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also known as the IPCC, was established. Since 1998, they have published 5 major reports which review the work of thousands of scientists from around the world to assess the global climate impact. The 2010 Cancun Agreement was the first time that the Conference of Parties agreed that future global warming should be limited to below 2 degrees Celsius relative to pre-industrial levels, which, as you recall, equals 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
So one of the most exciting and inspiring things that I've been able to do as mayor was to attend in 2015 the Paris Agreement signing. This governed emissions reductions from 2020 on, as Brandi pointed out earlier, through commitments of countries for pretty ambitious, nationally determined contribution.
So after another quarter century that we got in motion on this since Rio, we finally have a global agreement on climate action that, if perfectly implemented, will not keep us from exceeding the 2-degree limit. In fact, according to the United Nations Environmental Program Emissions Gap Report, it gets us to somewhere between 3 and 4 degrees Celsius.
So, what about Austin? Because we're talking about cities. So like we said, Austin's history of making climate commitments goes back a decade to 2007, when the council passed a resolution to make Austin the leading city in the nation in an effort to reduce and reverse the negative impacts of global warming. And this included many things that were in that resolution that Will Wynn signed as it came through council, whose 10th birthday we're celebrating later this week on Thursday. It included 700 megawatts of new savings energy through energy efficiency and conservation. It included getting 30% of all energy needs met through renewables by 2020. And all city facilities run on renewable energy by 2020. The city fleet being carbon neutral by 2020. And building codes requiring all new single-family homes to be net zero capable by 2015.
And in 2014, an even bolder resolution was adopted, establishing the goal of net zero community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It's hard to fathom how that can be accomplished, but there is a different mindset that is created by setting a goal of reaching zero rather than just making reductions.
So I came into office in 2015, and one of the first things that the new 10-1 council did was to adopt the city's community climate plan, which spells out the specific actions in action areas in all the major sectors contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, including energy and transportation, landfill emissions, and industrial processes. It identifies who is accountable for each action, who the participating stakeholders are, the barriers or limiting factors to success, and the level of impact possible, and the co-benefits of taking action.
This was followed by the Phase 1 implementation plan, which identifies where we are with each action area And this plan tells us what we're accomplishing. It also tells us where we need to focus.
So out of all this, we actually had some real victories that we're able to celebrate here as a city, and that other cities, quite frankly, look to. The City of Austin and its community-owned electric utility, Austin Energy, are recognized national leaders in demonstrating innovative green building programs, resource conservation initiatives, sustainable community development, renewable energy generation, and transportation electrification. Austin already has a reputation for innovation in the environmental space.
Yes, many of you were here and lived through this, but just a quick review. In the 80s, Austin developed the first green building program in the world. Our program was the predecessor to what is now the global LEED rating. They now have been teaching, and they have been teaching this program called Green by Design, very, very popular, and I highly recommend it. These workshops to local builders and residents hoping to either remodel or build a healthy, energy-efficient home. Austin Energy's commitment to renewable power began in the 1990s when we blazed a trail by purchasing power from the state's first commercial wind plant. Since then, we have continued to responsibly build our renewable portfolio with plans well into the future. And I want to acknowledge Mayor Adler for his leadership last year for putting in motion another 600 megawatts of solar energy. In the aughts, as they say, we helped develop the market for plug-in vehicles by sending Austin Energy staff around the country to develop soft orders from fleets of other cities and major employers to develop the market for plug-in hybrid vehicles. The utility also operates locally the Plug-in Everywhere network that is powered with renewable energy and allows plug-in hybrid and electric vehicle drivers to purchase 6 months of unlimited access to the more than 500 level 2 charging ports and 3 now DC fast ports for a pilot rate of $25 for 6 months. That's just about $1 a week. So they're trying to make it interesting for you.
And there are some areas that we need to take advantage of as the next stage, where we really need to focus to get the greatest impact. And these include things like really broad transportation demand management. The two biggest contributors are energy generation and transportation. Broad transportation demand management is the application of strategies and policies to reduce travel demand or to redistribute this demand in space or in time. We can create much better flow by more strategically using our roadways because we still have way too much and an unsustainable use of single occupancy vehicles.
So at the mayor's request, last year, I helped launch a program called Austin Don't Rush. The goal was to get people to do anything other than drive alone during rush hour traffic. There are so many ways to avoid the pain of driving yourself to work and facing that traffic by yourself.
So, if your work is conducive to it, and quite frankly, most of our work is conducive to it, everybody should try to flex their schedules so that they arrive at work and leave for work at times other than during rush hour. And that means you go to work a little bit before the 7 to 9 rush or a little bit after, and you come home a little bit before the 4 to 5, 5:30 rush or a little bit after.
I'd say 6 to be safe, or 7, 6:30. Anyway, one of my favorite strategies for skipping the morning hour rush is what I call smart start. You spend the morning, the first hour or so from at home, returning phone calls, checking emails and stuff, and then head in after the rush. You get some focused work done and then arrive without the stress of having faced that traffic. And you could do the reverse of that at the end of the day too. And if you have the flexibility before heading home, you could spend a few hours or even an hour or so enjoying your environs. Explore local shops, meet others for a happy hour, have a meal, or take in some entertainment. That way you can both enjoy your evening and your commute.
In this community, I'm not sure there's more upside potential and greater need than using transit. You need to find out if there's a Capital Metro transit route that would work for you. and you can do that by going to capmetro.org. You'll find there a really easy trip planner to use, or you can download the Capital Metro app, which also provides a trip planner to be able to use. It also gives you in real time departure information.
A bike ride can also get you to work, having enjoyed some fresh air and saved you from having to schedule a separate workout. If you don't live very close, you might try combining the bus and the bike. Most of the Cap Metro vehicles feature bike racks on the front of them, and their trains have the capacity to carry multiple bikes. And as a bonus, when you get to where you're going, then you have your bike, which allows you more flexibility to move around. Of course, if you do have to travel during rush hour, it is often more pleasant to share the ride. Maybe you know someone who lives or works close to you, and if not, ask around. Maybe your work colleague or a neighbor is near you and you didn't even know it. Capital Metro has a Metro Ride Share program which supports van and SUV pools for people in groups of 5 to 12 riders heading the same direction that are originating and ending at the similar location or vicinity. And Commute Solutions is a website that has a way to find potential carpool riders and drivers. If you have a job that doesn't require you to physically be present in the workplace, teleworking can be great. You might find that you're even more productive working from home, or a coffee shop, or a co-working space near your.
So as a community, and part of our community values and the work that we do, and encouraging both ourselves and other folks in the community, we really need to support businesses and encourage businesses to get on board with trip reduction programs as well. So if you own or manage a business, you should talk to your employees. Encourage them to find a workable way to avoid driving alone during rush hour. Support them by taking transit or joining them or setting up a carpool or a van pool program. And if it works for your kind of business, you should allow interested employees to stagger or flex their time. And then there are organizations in town like Movability that will actually come into your place of work and help talk to the employees and actually be the ones that develop the long-term strategy for helping and encouraging alternative commutes without losing productivity at all. And odds are you'd be happier and you'd find that your employees are happier.
An important office culture practice that you could implement would be to adopt a strategy of having core office hours, during which all the in-office important meetings take place. Then staff can use that flex scheduling on the earlier side or the later side, or take advantage of that smart start I mentioned, and still not miss a thing at the office. You might also use this as an opportunity to try out teleconferencing tools and invite people to participate in meetings virtually rather than in person.
So just to quantify this, so the experts tell us that if we were to reduce traffic by 20% during the peak hours, morning and in evening, we would have free flow traffic on I-35 and Mopac, a 20% reduction. That means everybody in the office doing this 1 day a week, or 20% of your employees doing it, and 80% of them continuing to drive during the peak hours. It doesn't take much to have a real significant impact, and quite frankly, with the $720 million transportation bond we just passed, and it was important, and thank you, the most cost-effective thing we could do that would have the greatest impact on congestion in this city is that behavioral change for 1 out of 5 people. So as a city and as a region, we need to be supporting and expanding on the ever-growing list of first and last mile alternatives. That's how you get from your house to the bus, and then when you take the bus wherever it is close to where you go, how you get from the bus or train to wherever it is that you want to end up. Because leaving the car at home or getting rid of one or more vehicles becomes more realistic when you tap into the flexibility of on-demand services like taxis or TNCs or pedicabs And in many parts of town, we have short-term vehicles and bike rental services like Car2Go and Zipcar and B-Cycle. And we have new technologies that are rolling out in our city. Chariot is expanding a new first and last mile option that I hope will be accessible and available to more and more people. Bridge, BRIDJ, will be coming into town as its second city after Pittsburgh to help provide kind of a Uber-like option that is buses and is much less expensive than is an Uber or a Lyft. So as Capital Metro is planning to do, we need to extend transit to suburban areas with park and rides and other facilities for a variety of reasons, from wanting to get close to Austin or having to relocate outside of Austin for affordability. There are hundreds of thousands of new residents in our surrounding towns. The fastest growing cities in the country have been alternating San Marcos and Georgetown number 2. And I think this year now it's Georgetown, Cedar Park, number 1, and San Marcos just fell to number 2. So from expanded bus service beyond Austin to the Green Line coming in from Elgin, our backbone transit services have to be expanded. We also need to continue planning for high-capacity transit solutions, both in Austin and between major cities.
Other great opportunities lie with our use of energy. Not only do we need to continue our shift toward more renewable energy, we need to make sure that our city is designed to use less of it, all the way down to the household level. We are embracing smart city solutions like advanced metering for utility customers, which can help them make informed decisions and impact their behavior. We need to inspire citywide energy efficiency and behavior change, and identify high energy users in all sectors, and target incentives initiatives to maximize impact. These are areas of focus that could have high impact on emissions. There are in various development, but they need to move faster if we want to meet our goals by 2020. And between now and Earth Day, I want to issue a little challenge to see if we can get everyone in Austin who has a porch light or an exterior light outside their apartment to change it out for an LED. These bulbs stay on the longest, they face the public, and they have an opportunity to dramatically reduce our energy without changing one iota of anyone's quality of life. And we're working to put together a pilot swap out upgrade incentive for the Earth Day Festival this year.
So where does that leave us? That leaves us with great progress. It leaves us having a great plan. It leaves Austin among the leading cities in our planning and to some degree our implementation. But does all this add up to what it is that we need to do in order to be able to meet the challenge of climate change? And even if it does, will any of it matter if other cities aren't doing the same kind of work at the same time? Then you consider the increased populations and the sheer complexity of organizing nations to take coordinated action. I mean, it all, going back to how I started it, it is overwhelming and it is complex. But that's also where we begin to hit the barriers of our thinking that have to be disrupted if we're going to create a future in which we can actually achieve the end of the climate crisis. You know, when we look at global trends on emissions, there's a term that's referred to as business as usual. Sometimes it's called the baseline. There's even an acronym for it, BAU. And we see the BAU marked on graphs showing the various scenarios for our future based on what we are doing now and what it is that we plan to do.
But what is business as usual? What does that really mean? Consider that business as usual refers to the way we usually do things right now, without thinking, and the reasons we give ourselves for doing that. I might jump in my single occupancy vehicle and come to a meeting because I was too busy and ran out of time to take the bus. But the way we currently move ourselves around and use energy and consume goods and operate commerce and generate waste are all parts of our business as usual. My grandfather used to have a word for that called excuses. Ask a child and they see it quite simply. There are no excuses that, in reality, justify ruining the climate for our future generations. And yet business as usual happens every day, over and over, in every moment with all of us. And it adds up to costly delays in action that could make the difference. When it comes to climate, business as usual puts us well over the maximum allowable warming. And the impacts will happen regardless of our excuses. And while we're not going to get too far into detail about the impacts, it's important to note that here in Central Texas, global warming really looks like global weirding, to quote Katharine Hayhoe. Extreme weather, flooding, forest fires, drought. These conditions will continue to get more and more extreme in Central Texas. Impacts on food supplies are also a factor. And who will be impacted the hardest? Rural and lower income households. That paints a pretty bleak picture, I guess, doesn't it? And even if we do everything right here in Austin, how about Jacksonville, Florida? Or Mumbai, India? How do we know that it will make any difference for these coastal cities that are in jeopardy?
And the truth is that we don't know. The truth is that we have already put ourselves in an impossible position from which only a completely unpredictable breakthrough will result in a sustainable future. Yet in history, those kinds of breakthroughs have happened repeatedly. You know, even though you can be in a situation that seems bleak and hopeless with no possibility of ever having change happens. Apartheid occurred like it was a huge entrenched cultural norm in South Africa, but it too was something that could be ended.
How do we create a breakthrough for Austin and the world? It begins with being willing to tell the truth about the way it is and the way it isn't, to deal with where we have and have not kept our promises. It involves dealing with and resolving the aspects of our climate plan that are not on track. And it involves being open to unpredictable outcomes and welcoming change.
So, innovation breeds innovation. And it is imperative that Austin continues to work to welcome innovation and be, quite frankly, one of the centers of innovation, not only for this country but for the world. There are a lot of people that are counting on our city to give a real significant contribution to this end. We've put a lot of energy into the Department of Transportation's Smart Cities grant process last year. And while we didn't win that challenge, going through the process helped us to identify and to begin and to set up relationships with private industries that we did not have before, communications between transportation schools and universities in this state that we did not have before. It's led right now to a smart city challenge and operation at the state level that now has the cities of Texas participating the same way the cities had participated nationally in that earlier challenge, with some of the corporate partners that were with us as we went through that challenge. These new cross-sector relationships and dialogues, creative ideas, and the willingness to work with each other is moving forward. Our relationship with the Rocky Mountain Institute was deepened. Soon after they chose Austin as the city to focus on for a mobility transformation or a mobility makeover, they joined with our local community and started working together with us on a strategy and implementing steps to reduce the carbon footprint of our transportation, reducing the vehicle miles traveled, preparing Austin to welcome and integrate autonomous vehicles. Because we want Austin to become the leader in adoption of commercialization of electric and autonomous vehicles, and be real leaders in shifting mobility as a service instead of vehicles as a commodity and depreciating assets. In 10 days, I go to Washington, D.C. To participate in a program initiated by the Bloomberg Foundation and the Aspen Institute, where Austin has been selected as one of 10 cities in the world to send their mayors to meet together in what will be a year-long program to start setting up and investigating and talking through how cities can get ready for autonomous vehicles. And it is an honor, really. It's actually going to be pretty cool to find myself with the mayors of Paris and Rio de Janeiro and Tel Aviv, among other Helsinki, some other United States mayors, Los Angeles and Nashville, to be part of that process. And I owe that invitation to the people in this community and many of the people that are in this room.
Yeah, I'm excited about this possibility as well, and so much so, in fact, that this week I joined the Rocky Mountain Institute team to help bring forward that future for Austin and the planet.
So, electric drive vehicles have great potential to reduce U.S. Petroleum imports, improve air quality, improve utility operations, and support a healthy economy. GM is just beginning to introduce its and release its 238-mile Chevy Bolt electric car, which is the market's first so-called affordable, long-range electric car. And while some auto manufacturers are only doing the bare minimum around electric vehicle production to satisfy really California requirements, others are going all in, like Tesla and Volkswagen, which has plans to sell as many as 3 million plug-in vehicles per year by 2025. That represents more than a quarter of that company's total projected sales. The company promises to introduce more than 30 new electric vehicle and plug-in hybrid models by that time, and pledging to offer 20 plug-in models by 2020.
So again, the two biggest contributors to emissions that we have control over are electrical uses and transportation. And there are core drivers which, if in place, will help accelerate climate action in these and other areas. First is market-based solutions. For example, the price of solar is dropping, and as a result, people are buying more solar. The renewables market is rapidly expanding. We need to provide support and incentives for the EV market to have the same success. In terms of local policy change and implementation, such as the Universal Recycling Ordinance and our net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 goal, these are key to providing the infrastructure for that change and holding everyone in our community accountable. That said, compliance with and participation are key to implementing the policy, and we need your partnership here. Then there's the national policy scene. While there is much to be dismayed and concerned about at the national level when it comes to the environment, I'm going to say something a little crazy here, which is this may be our best opportunity to get in place something that many people have talked about for a very long time that has the biggest possible chance of shifting things radically, and that is getting an actual price on carbon. We need to look at this administration and everyone who came along with it as our best hope of really putting that in place, because that will drive many, 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 many thousands and millions of decisions from there. Then we want to be stimulating impactful behavior change. Transformative approaches to individual and organizational participation in changes that reduce emissions is critical. And we rely on you guys to help think of creative ways to bring communities into action, to create new norms of the way things are done, so that there's no status to having a big expansive green lawn. It is, in fact, something we look down on. We want things that are sustainable. And in Texas, having a big, expansive green lawn is not sustainable. Then it comes to the big one that's sort of on the table, and we can't really achieve the goals that we want to if we don't address some form of carbon sequestration. If you read the fine print of Deadline 2020 report, keeping warming below 1.5 degrees is only considered possible with the use of negative emissions strategies. These are biological and technological approaches that remove carbon from the air. A few include biochar, land management strategies and reforestation, direct air capture technology, and other carbon sequestration technologies as examples of this. And while I don't have the chops to actually explain it, and I am a little bit afraid of the whole idea, there are a lot of people talking about geoengineering, and it is a conversation that we're going to have to face in the coming years.
So as we develop these solutions, it is equally imperative that we embrace diversity and inclusion and equity in our thinking and in our actions as well. So again, business as usual will not make this city more affordable. It will not make this city more livable or more walkable, and it won't make food more accessible. It won't make employment more equitable. If we address these issues without intentionally disrupting our thinking, our actions, without literally stopping the action and be willing to say, wait a minute, is this really going to lead us to a better situation for everyone? We have to be disruptive and we have to embrace change. Better yet, we have to ask ourselves, how will this plan fail to lead to a fair situation for everyone, so that we can learn, so that we do not just get more of the same. And plans that do not include fairness for everyone are designed to ultimately fail. So business as usual, the status quo, the path we are on, is failing us. Yet in reality, the future has not actually happened yet. The future is not a foregone conclusion. It is ours to create. We are in this together, and no one of us can afford to wait for everyone else to save the city. So I am asking myself, with everything that we and I are already doing, what do I have to become in order to inspire and participate in and help drive the level of action and thinking that will get this done? I have to continue to be dedicated and focused, laser-like, with my own assumptions and willing to confront my own ways of thinking and acting inconsistent with business as usual. I have to be bold in my leadership and in our pursuit of an accelerated action. And I want to do what it takes to disrupt the way that we think, to disrupt business as usual, so that we give ourselves really no alternatives but to succeed at fulfilling the climate plans that we have set and the goals that the cities have set for Deadline 2020. To do this, we're going to put together a task force of civic leaders to partner with us on community engagement and climate initiatives. We're going to request training and briefings of the City Council by local climate leaders and stakeholders. We're going to ensure that we continue to improve the transparency of our climate action so the community can both monitor and be involved. We have to reevaluate the current status of the areas of highest carbon impact that are not on track for meeting the goals of the community climate plan. And we have to become an early adopter of smart meters. We have a lot of good data that tells us what makes a climate plan most effective. But of course, no plan, no matter how elegant, means nothing if it's not implemented.
So who do you have to become? What does it take? It takes you. It takes being unstoppable, being bold, being creative, being radical. You have a distinct role to play, holding the city to account. Read up on the climate plan. Reinforce community support for changes. The city has teed up a lot of opportunities to make the changes, but not everyone is making them. And that's the part the city is limited in addressing. I know for a fact we have rain garden installation rebates that I think maybe 3 people have taken advantage of, or organizations have taken advantage of in the last year or so. They've been available. This is a way to infiltrate more water into our aquifers, to slow down erosion, to help prevent flooding, done on a wide scale. And we need people to really take action. So to that end, we're almost positive we're going to be doing a rain garden installation demonstration at the Earth Day event at Houston Tillotson this year. So people can see it in action, see it's not scary. It's just moving some dirt around, putting some rocks in place, planting some flowers, and it can make a difference. We rely on you to engage people to participate in all of these opportunities. Please leverage your organizations to support city initiatives, such as electrifying our fleets and extending the rail system.
So, going back for a minute to the question of what does it matter if other cities are not doing their part? Well, first, I would point out to you that many cities are, in fact, doing their part. In fact, our ambitious goal of having net zero emissions by the year 2050, our sister city in Adelaide has set their goal at 2025. Not very many cities are at that level. So there are a lot of cities that are looking to the cities that are taking a leadership role. And as I said earlier, that are looking to us and expecting us to help establish and design and demonstrate paths to success. And we as a community have to rise to that challenge and to that assignment and to that responsibility. So in a moment, we're going to take questions about the meeting in Mexico City or the conversation more broadly. But before we do that, just a couple of things real fast. First, again, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being here on a Sunday rather. That's how my weekends look.
They all blur together.
Being here on a Sunday when there were a lot of other places that you could have been. Thank you for the years that many of you have spent in the trenches on this issue. Thank you for the new people that are here opening themselves up for joining at the front lines and in the trenches. And I just want to say thank you for that. And I want to start the question and answer with a question for you. A question I answered just a second ago. And the question that I would ask is, what are you willing to do by way of support? What steps are you willing to take? How are you willing to commit yourself to come to your cities and your world's needs? And Brandi, if anybody is brave enough to raise their hand, and I hope that they are, I think we should take down their names.
Let's give him a hand first before we get started. Thank you, Brandi. Thank you, Brandi.
My name is Jolly Clark, and I don't get an opportunity often to publicly know that my claim to fame is that lady up there is my daughter, and she's doing fabulous things. She's done fabulous things so far, and she'll do some great things in the future. The fact that we have, thank you, Mayor. The fact that we've just elected Mr. Trump, who believes that global warming is a joke and something the Chinese have done with it. I have two questions. One is rhetorical, the other is specific. I mean, if we do everything we can with he having put a man in charge of the EPA that wants to get rid of the EPA, are we wasting our time? The second is very specific. I realize it's a biannual sport at the radical, fanatical, extreme far right-wing religious or Republicans over in
Okay, Dad.
legislature to beat up in Austin. To beat up in Austin, is there anything specific we can do to get the trucks off I-35? That would make Austin a fabulous place to drive through, or at least a lot better.
Okay, I'll take are we wasting our time? I think that's what most of our talk was about. And I think that there are things, including market-based solutions, when it becomes in the interest of business to shift, and all the talk about bringing back coal is not going to make it more affordable or more sustainable or more practical than harnessing the sun or wind. So these are examples of the market pushing in the right direction. The same is true of electric vehicles. We've just been leasing a Leaf for the last 4 or 5 months, and I can't tell you how much I love it. In fact, we have 2 vehicles, and the other one requires gas, and we always prioritize driving the Leaf. Whoever's driving the most that day takes the Leaf, or if we're only going one place as a family, we take the Leaf. And so a few months went by, and all of a sudden I realized I was in the other car and it needed gas. I was like, incensed. I have to go to a gas station? I mean, it was like, we're just in this cusp of a culture shift. I want to say in the world of transportation, if you look backward over the last 50 to 100 years, transportation has looked pretty much the same in America. I cannot tell you what things are going to look like in 10 years. There's some fantasies, there's some ideas about what it's going to look like, but the future is not written. It is, and there are businesses banking on a totally new future of our transportation. So there are opportunities in big spaces that businesses interested in taking advantage of, and it's going to make our lives better as well.
Heavy vehicles, transportation and transmission, the 2 biggest causes of gas house emissions. Some of the biggest causes are heavy vehicles. Kirk Watson is working with the state legislature right now to get the ability for trucks to be able to use SH-130 without paying a toll, which should divert some traffic. But you need to remember that almost 70% of the trucks that we see on I-35 are making a local stop. So there's only a limited amount of impact that we can have. It'd be really important, but it's a limited amount of impact. But we can do things on electrification of buses that we have in our city. And people like Smitty, who just retired, is volunteering and helping in my office because we collect retired people who are really good, to see what we can do about trying to gather everyone together in the state, in cities, in the region, and by region I mean nationally, to come together collectively to make one group purchase of electrified buses so as to reduce the costs and encourage the opportunity to have manufacturing similar to what this city did back with cars in 10, 12 years ago.
We'll build the market.
Build the market.
Which is the biggest contributor for the city of Austin to greenhouse gas? Our building, our electric, our power generation, or our driving transportation? And as you were going into the budget process early this year, which can be most, depending on your answer, how can that be most impacted by what the city does with our budget?
The answer to your question, Roy, is we don't know that answer. But Leslie Poole, council member, and I have initiated a resolution that asks the city to come back and tell us exactly that. Most of our climate change work, we've really put resources against, including some of the resource management questions, has been in Austin Energy. And what we have asked staff to do, and they are now, we'll follow it up with a resolution, but they are now doing interdisciplinary and interdepartment within the city out of the sustainability officers department, is to come up with exactly that list. What are the different things that we could be doing in different departments that would have the greatest impact on the footprint that we have as a city, and what are the costs associated with each of those, so that as a community we're able to look at those lists and decide where is the best place to put our dollars and our attention.
I think, Mayor, what he might be pointing at is Austin Energy and the Fayette coal plant. Is that part of what's behind the question?
That's part of it. Per Michael Osborne, actually we've done pretty
Is there a way to do that?
I think so, and we've asked that question, and we should have that pretty shortly from staff, from that interdepartment look at within those different areas, not only the city departments, but the services they provide and the things that are happening in the community in those areas, because we need to take a look at Fayette and what is the cost of the next step with Fayette versus electrifying all the buses that are in the city. We have to be able to compare those different alternatives, both with their benefit and their cost. So we're asking now exactly the same question.
And I want to say that I'm encouraged that kind of what we saw to come together with the Smart Cities application is that cross-governmental, cross-sector conversations, rather than cities saying, what can the city do, and the county saying, what can the county do, and businesses saying, what can we do, it's become more of a holistic question, what can we do together? And I think that is where the real opportunity lies.
I would love to park and ride. Where are we ever going to have park and ride parking lots?
Yeah.
So we're in the process of doing that right now. And there are two debates that are happening simultaneously. The first one is, do we do additional park and rides? And do we line up roads and our resources in a way to be able to do that? And the second one is, where do we put them? Because there were some early drafts out that had some park and rides in the aquifer, and we can't do that. But we also can't let that stop the push forward on the move to establish the park and rides. We have to be able to do both of those two things at the same time, because we can't have one wait. But I'm not sure there's 3 votes on the council to put a park and ride in the aquifer and abrogate the environmental standards that we have. But as a community, we need to move forward. And right now there's alignment with TxDOT and the RMA and Campo and Travis County and Williamson County and Hayes County to building park.
We've run out of time.
Yeah.
Past time. Thank you so much for coming out. What a great presentation.